Hi, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. I know it sounds a little bit childish of a book to read, but when I actually saw it in one of these lists of hundreds of books, I thought that I should read it. I have been always a fan of vampire stories, partly maybe because when I was small, there was only two channels and a TV, and ready order what programs came on. And the old Dracula movies with Bela Lugosi uh, were among those films. And I saw them in a very early age, and I liked them. But so when I saw this book, I thought that why not read the original story? But when I read it, of course, I learned that it's not the original story, but there are many stories before that, and it's a sort of folklore that everything is gathered together, and that's the vampire stories, and that's maybe the Bram Stoker's version that we know. But the book was kind of different than the movies. Of course, it was written in 1800s, so it's a old-fashioned book in that sense, and it has a different kind of approach to Count Dracula. Of course, there are these figures we all know. If you have seen any vampire movies, there is always Lucy, and then there is Mina, and then there are Reinfeldt, the eager helper of Count Dracula, and then there is, of course, the Dracula himself and Dr. Van Helsing, that in this version was from Holland, so Netherlands. So the book starts, and of course, because you can write in a book that people are in different locations of the world, they do. They do go to different locations, but if you are filming a movie, you're supposed to stay in England all the time to not get very high insurance payments for the actors. So this started about this young man, Jonathan, being in Count Dracula's castle. And that is quite in many movies too. It starts from there. But he was there a very long time. And he was teaching Dracula things and learning about the country and learning about the papers. And he was a kind of attorney of Count Dracula, sent from England. And I try not to spoil too much, but of course, if you have seen any Dracula movies, you know the basic plot. So if you haven't watched one first, and then watch this. But I don't know if I can find anyone who hasn't seen at least one Dracula movie. But well, Jonathan is on Transylvania, and in Count Dracula's house or castle, and he starts to find out the weird things and starts to meet some really weird women in there too. And he tries to escape, and in the end, he does escape. And because Count Dracula doesn't want him to leave for some reason, just doesn't want him to leave. And when he escapes, he has some kind of a brain fever, and he's very long time sick, and then he doesn't know, or he doesn't trust himself whether it was true or not. But the whole book is actually collected from or written in a form of a diary of different people. And that's interesting, and that's somehow, I think, typical for 1800s thinking. I don't think that nowadays anyone would make a movie or book that is solely based on different people's diaries and some newspaper clippings. Of course, he has made everything up, but it feels real. And that's nice about this book. Well, of course, Jonathan comes back to England and marries Mina, and Count Dracula, of course, also comes to England a little bit later with his belongings, and there the things start to evolve. But the things that were in this book that are not usual in those stories are quite interesting. For example, these vampires hunt children, toddlers. In any vampire movie, I haven't seen anyone with a toddler or with a child. Those are this kind of it's like everyday telling or everyday story. The child will wander away and doesn't want to come to home for a night and starts to play, and then they are out too long, and then they are out all night, and then they are a little bit sick when they come back. But I don't know. I think that nowadays people wouldn't stand it. It would be too cruel, too repulsive to many people, and it wouldn't fit in with this romanticized picture about Dracula. So that we see in the book, but we do not see in the movies. And of course, in this book, people also die. In the movies, almost everybody survives, and when Count Dracula finally dies, then everybody will come back to normal, like it would happen in any theory like that. But usually in the movies it happens because I don't know, they want to give people more hope and not despair if this Count Dracula just kills people. So that was another difference. And of course, Dracula himself is a little bit different, the way he is described. And one crucial big thing is that he can be outside during daytime. So the story is that when the sun comes up, then Dracula turns into dust. Doesn't apply in this book. So he's wandering around during the daytime, but he has his power at the nighttime. So that's the difference. And of course, he likes to sleep during the daytime, so he can rumble around through the nights. And what else? There is this legend of garlic, of course, but it's garlic flowers, not the actual like garlic. But there isn't this like holy water, but it's the dwarf that you eat. So that's the one that they use. They like crumble it around, and then Dracula cannot come because there's a dwarf. So that's one big difference. But of course, I understand that in the movies it's much more movie-like to like go with the holy water like this than to have these small crackers and crumble them around. It's not very, very dynamic. And there is this, usually there are few men in the movies, but here is the gang of 4 young men that then start to wander about Count Dracula. But for some reason, some odd reason, this Dr. Abraham van Helsing from Holland, he knows everything about Dracula. He just suspects that is it that case now, and he's not very eager to tell the young men what is it about, and because of that, of course, people suffer because Dracula goes around and sucks blood from the people. And of course, there are these new adventures or inventions from 1800s like blood transfusion. So when Lucy is a victim of Count Dracula, then they give him like blood transplant, though. So they take blood from one of these young men and give it to Lucy, and then he will be like bright and rain again. But of course, it doesn't work that way. We know that now, or there are quite a big risk that something happens. But these are the like differences between what we see Dracula movies now and what the actual book was. And of course, there is this kind of a chase in different parts of London and in different parts of the world. They then I don't know about this plot. What's the sense that then Dracula is in England and then he travels back to Transylvania and they chase him over there, and then there is the grand finale. There is some kind of a logical gap in there why that happens, but that's the basic plot still. And when it was explained that why Count Dracula would come to England. There was this kind of a mentioning of a child brain, which is very odd to me, because at the same time, at the beginning of the book, he describes, like in the movies usually, that Count Dracula is very like well-mannered and knows very many things because he has lived through the centuries, and then suddenly he's referred as a child brain, like he would be somehow he cannot understand about living in England. But inevitably, if you have lived for hundreds of years, you have been in different parts of the world and you know all the cultures. That's only logic. And then there was some article in the end of the book where this person explains that Count Dracula came to England because there were all these new inventions. There was this kind of phonograph where they can record talking for their diaries. They are all very keen on keeping their diaries and writing their letters. And then there is the typing machine, and typing is invented, and shorthand is invented, and these all inventions, and even the mention of Kodak camera. So those would be the reasons why Count Dracula came to England. But I don't see it that way. If you think about how he is described in the beginning of the book, he would be there for culture or for power. It's largely described that he like fought with the Turks, and he has this loyal subjects of Slovaks, which I don't think the Slovaks will appreciate, but they would be the helpers of Count Dracula. So this was a little bit like this kind of gap in thinking, I don't know, but I thought that the afterwords of some person were just rubbish. I don't agree with any of it, not with the thinking that I have on Count Dracula. But of course, because it's written in the 1800s, you can find pretty much very many chauvinistic things in there. Women are women, and women are too stupid to understand and too weak to bear bad news or excitement and that kind of things. But they were true in those days, or women were thought about in those terms, and that was other politically non-correct was this, because one of these men, this young man, was doctor, and he was working in like they say loony bin, so in mental institution, and they refer to Reinfeldt as a lunatic. So there is no sugarcoating, no words. He was just very refined lunatic, and they always go to talk to him and like observe him. What does he do? But the whole like role of Reinfeldt is really small. I always remember the comic version of Count Dracula and the Reinfeldt in that. It was hilarious. I can just see his face and Dr. Van Helsing. The same thing. I cannot get them out of my head how they looked in their roles, and it was quite nice. And it was a good farce. Count Dracula. I can try to find those pictures and put them in the end. But this was an interesting book. If you are not like remotely interested on vampire stories or Count Dracula, then do not bother. Do not waste your time. There are very, very many books that are much better than this. But if you are interested in these Dracula stories, I really encourage you to read this. It's a nice. Of course, there wasn't a dull moment. It's an old book, and it describes very well, and I can understand that if of course, it was named Dracula, so everybody knows what it is about. But otherwise, if you would start reading this and didn't know what is it about, if this was the first time that you hear about vampires and Count Dracula, this would be quite a thrilling book. But of course, I knew from the start how it is going to end and what's going to happen. Not in detail, because like I said, more people die in this book than usually in the movies. But it was a great book. I recommend. Thank you. Have a nice day, and we see you soon. Goodbye.